there. So essentially, this idea of transitioning from surviving
Yes.
to thriving,
Yes,
but
exactly.
also keeping in mind, and I'm going to take it back to this direction of Khadija that we're going in. And so last week when we spoke, we also spoke about what she probably had
Yes.
access to.
Yes.
So maybe through a father,
Yeah.
maybe in some way or the other, maybe being surrounded by people
Yes.
who in some way or the other inspired her, or made her think a particular way as a
Yes.
businesswoman. So it
Yeah.
shaped her and so on. So isn't that exactly what, if we look at contemporary society and if we look around us, isn't that exactly
It is.
what sort of holds us back?
It is
Or not
exactly
holds us
that.
back, what is
It
really,
is
really
that.
active restraints and constraints?
Yeah, it's that and then some, and then some,
Yes.
and I'm gonna touch on that again today, inshallah, in conjunction with other issues, because yesterday we focused a lot on mindset skills. So I'm going to introduce you to a person who's quite prolific online, but while I'm doing that, I'm going to give some of my own personal story,
Yes.
because I have struggled quite a lot with finances and businesses. I've always been interested and I've always had that inclination, but I've definitely had my blocks and definitely had my struggles. And then for me, like the pivotal moment was in 2019. I just moved out. I moved into a new area, and then I found myself really battling. And then somebody was Lamise Benjamin. She was doing EFT emotional freedom technique, is when
Okay.
you tap. And then she sent me and a few other people this clip by Dan Locke. Dan Locke is a I'll explain who he is, but I first want to tell you this clip, because for me, this
story.
one particular video really, it created such a powerful shift within me in terms of my own mindset skills, that I made the decision while watching this clip that I was going to, it was the unselfish decision to be wealthy, because I used to be an NGO or NPO director, and my NPO was Project ICRA, Read, like Project Read, because I'm very passionate about literacy. So the first part of his video, he talks about the 7 things that the rich people do that the poor people don't do. And I'm going to explain to you, I'm going to do 2 things at the same time. I'm going to explain to you why I started this NGO and why this video really resonated with me, why it really struck me. He said that the rich people read while the poor people watch TV. And that really struck a nerve with me, because, look, I mean, first of all, it was very encouraging, because I've always read motivational books, and I've always read books by people who are successful. So like, I thought, okay, I'm on a roll, at least I'm going to get somewhere. Okay, that's very encouraging, alhamdulillah. But for me, part of the reason why I was struggling was because I was trying to run this NGO, and I was using the fundraising methods of writing these long proposals.
Yes.
And the proposals are incredibly tedious, and then you got to send them to corporates, and a lot of the time they don't even look at your proposals, and you end up writing like 10 pages of just like statistics or whatever, and they're not even interested.
Very, very tedious process.
Very tedious process. Fundraising can be incredibly tedious. And then the problem is that if you're like a one-man marching band, if you are running NGO and you're by yourself, your work suffers, because you are also the project manager. You have to do, you're doing the projects yourself, but then you're also trying to get funding, because I was getting funding from the States, but it just wasn't enough. So I needed to get more funding. And then I was wasting a lot of time asking for help, and at the same time it felt like begging, which is not. Then you got that needy energy, and then it's just like the whole situation's a mess, because you're trying to juggle.
You feel like you're standing with a begging bowl, and it shouldn't be like that.
It shouldn't be like that, because you are working and you
Of
are
course.
worthy to be compensated for your time and your energy and your effort, as well as the results. But if Dan Locke himself says that if you are a jack of all trades, then you're a master of none. So that's basically what was happening to me. I was spreading myself far too thin, and then I was struggling financially on top of it. And so the first part about reading, it really struck a nerve with me, because the whole reason why I started a literacy-based NGO was because I worked for another foundation that I did marketing and fundraising for. And that foundation had a lot of different projects. They had disaster relief, they had education, they had healthcare. But the one project that really got my attention and really got me excited was the adult literacy project. And I think I probably have spoken about this before, but I'm definitely going to speak about it again. I had the privilege to witness for people experience powerful internal transformations just by learning to read. Simple things like a lady, her husband was amazed with her, and he was in awe just because she could sign her own name and she didn't need his help. Like, that actually had a positive impact on their marriage. That's so powerful. And then there was another woman who, she learned how to read, and somehow she was able to, it's like she had this new confidence or sense of
I will
self-worth.
imagine how empowering, how
It is, but
liberating.
it's also, it's very emotional. Like,
Of
you know, because
course.
I'm a revert, right? I became Muslim in 2009, and then I learned Arabic in 2009, 2010. And I'm learning like Alif, Ba, Ta,
Ah,
The. And then I remember I was at my teacher's house, and she had like children. They're all younger than me. They're all adult children, younger than me, but they could all read fluently Arabic. But when you're an adult and you're learning what children must learn, it's
I can't even
incredibly,
imagine.
it's
Yeah.
incredibly like that'll nothing will smash your ego more
I would
than
imagine what
learning
a
to read.
humbling
It's
experience.
extremely, it's actually painful, because the people that talk about the people that go through the adult literacy programs are actually in tears. They are so emotional about it, because it really affects people on an internal level. So this one woman, she had, her son was a gangster, and she managed to get him in line and started getting him to perform salah, because she just had this command, like, no, you're going to perform salah now, you're going to be an upright Muslim, you're not, you know, you're not going to do gangs anymore. And then there was another man in the same area, and we were talking, and I said to him, like, why is it that your brother is a gangster but you're not? And he said simply, I read. That was it. Oh, I read. I'm not a gangster because I read. Because he didn't get sucked into his environment. Because reading opens up your consciousness. It takes you into another world. You understand? It opens you up to new possibility. So to me, this statement of rich people read while poor people watch TV, it makes sense. Because look, if you need a mentor that's going to affect your internal dialogue, that's going to affect your psychological mindset skills, and also just thinking in a certain concise way that helps you to identify what you need the most in order to be wealthy, it makes sense that reading is going to have an impact, because that's how you get your mentor without your mentor even being there. If you think about, like, if the wealthy people or the successful people are a minority and you can't always have physical access to them, they have books, they have articles, they have their words in print. You understand? So when we look at it that way, because I know from experience, when I read books written by successful people, I definitely do feel a shift within
Of course.
myself. It's a very powerful psychological therapy. And then at the same time, like, if you consider within what does the Quran do? If you learn the Quran with translation, with meaning, and you're reciting it with understanding, what's that going to do to you? You understand? That's the most powerful speech of all time.
Of course.
So that's actually, and if you think about it, the very first verse that came from the Quran, or through the Quran as the Quran, the very first verse is Iqra,
Ikra.
read in the name of your Lord. Read and your Lord is most generous. And it's interesting how the generosity and the reading is linked together,
Absolutely.
because this is where you see a massive shift in consciousness. Like Alice Bonawanta says, I do not change people's outer condition until they change who they are in themselves. And so reading is definitely a tool that creates that internal shift. It's something that we take for granted, you know, because most of us can read. But then if you look at South Africa, we look at our economy, we look at our unemployment rate. 80% of South Africans, the statistic I heard is that 80% are illiterate. So if we really want real change in South Africa, because I find out of all the NGO, NPO departments, the literacy is the one that is the most unsung.
Yeah.
Is the literacy people are the unsung heroes. They're the ones that tend to be overlooked. But if we want to see real change in this country, then we need to
Go there.
take adult literacy and literacy in general much more seriously. If we want to see that shift.
Sister Lila, I think before we continue on that point that you've just raised, we'll go for our break. And you are listening to Radio 786 100.4 FM. You are tuned to Community Pulse. We are in our segment on social justice, speaking to Sister Lila. Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break.